packaging applications. A Java.EE application is delivered in an Enterprise Archive EAR file, a standard Java archive jar file with an EAR extension. Using EAR files and modules makes it possible to assemble a number of different Java.EE applications using some of the same components. No extra coding is needed. It is only a matter of assembling or packaging various Java.EE modules into Java.EE EAR files. An EAR file, see Figure 16, contains Java.EE modules and deployment descriptors. Figure 16, EAR file structure. A deployment descriptor is an XML document with an XML extension that describes the deployment settings of an application, a module, or a component. Because deployment descriptor information is declarative, it can be changed without the need to modify the source code. At runtime, the Java.EE server reads the deployment descriptor and acts upon the application, module, or component accordingly. There are two types of deployment descriptors, Java.EE and runtime. A Java.EE deployment descriptor is defined by a Java.EE specification and can be used to configure deployment settings on any Java.EE compliant implementation. A runtime deployment descriptor is used to configure Java.EE implementation specific parameters. For example, the Sun Java System Application Server Platform Edition 9 runtime deployment descriptor contains information such as the context root of a web application, the mapping of portable names of an application's resources to the server's resources, and application server implementation specific parameters, such as caching directives. The application server runtime deployment descriptors are named Sun module type XML and are located in the same directory as the Java.EE deployment descriptor. A Java.EE module consists of one or more Java.EE components for the same container type and one component deployment descriptor of that type. An Enterprise Bean module deployment descriptor, for example, declares transaction attributes and security authorizations for an Enterprise Bean. A Java.EE module without an application deployment descriptor can be deployed as a standalone module. The four types of Java.EE modules are as follows. EJB modules, which contain class files for Enterprise Beans and an EJB deployment descriptor. EJB modules are packaged as jar files with a jar extension. Web modules, which contain servlet class files, JSP files, supporting class files, GIF and HTML files, and a web application deployment descriptor. Web modules are packaged as jar files with a web archive extension. Application client modules, which contain class files and an application client deployment descriptor. Application client modules are packaged as jar files with a jar extension. Resource adapter modules, which contain all Java interfaces, classes, native libraries, and other documentation, along with the resource adapter deployment descriptor. Together, these implement the connector architecture. See J2EE connector architecture, page 23 for a particular EIS. Resource adapter modules are packaged as jar files with an RAR resource adapter archive extension. Development roles. Reusable modules make it possible to divide the application development and deployment process into distinct roles so that different people or companies can perform different parts of the process. The first two roles involve purchasing and installing the Java.EE product and tools. After software is purchased and installed, Java.EE components can be developed by application component providers, assembled by application assemblers, and deployed by application deployers. In a large organization, each of these roles might be executed by different individuals or teams. This division of labor works because each of the earlier roles outputs a portable file that is the input for a subsequent role. For example, in the application component development phase, an Enterprise Bean software developer delivers EJB jar files. In the application assembly role, another developer combines these EJB jar files into a Java.EE application and saves it in an EAR file. In the application deployment role, a system administrator at the customer site uses the EAR file to install the Java.EE application into a Java.EE server. The different roles are not always executed by different people. If you work for a small company, for example, or if you are prototyping a sample application, you might perform the tasks in every phase. Java.EE Product Provider. The Java.EE Product Provider is the company that designs and makes available for purchase the Java.EE platform APIs and other features defined in the Java.EE specification. Product providers are typically application server vendors who implement the Java.EE platform according to the Java.EE 5 platform specification. Tool Provider. The tool provider is the company or person who creates development, assembly, and packaging tools used by component providers, assemblers, and deployers. Application Component Provider. The application component provider is the company or person who creates web components, enterprise beans, applets, or application clients for use in Java.EE applications. Enterprise Bean Developer. An enterprise bean developer performs the following tasks to deliver an EJB jar file that contains the enterprise bean S. Writes and compiles the source code. Specifies the deployment descriptor. Packages the class files and deployment descriptor into the EJB jar file. Web Component Developer. A web component developer performs the following tasks to deliver a WAR file containing the web component S. Writes and compiles servlet source code. Writes JSP, Java server faces, and HTML files. Specifies the deployment descriptor. Packages the class, JSP, and HTML files and deployment descriptor into the WAR file. Application Client Developer. An application client developer performs the following tasks to deliver a jar file containing the application client. Writes and compiles the source code. Specifies the deployment descriptor for the client. Packages the class files and deployment descriptor into the jar file.